project that they were doing. So it took a while to get there. There's a lot of rigmarole through the State Department and NRCS and all that, but I finally made it, and it was just awesome. Landed there, and this is a picture of the flag of Palau, and it has pretty good significance because it's the full moon surrounded by the blue Pacific waters, and that's really what Palau is. It's a small island archipelago, about 350 islands, and the nearest landmass is the Philippines to the west. It's about 900 kilometers, and then about the same distance away to the south is Papua New Guinea. And so they're all by themselves out there. This island chain formed from volcanic activity. And the first people to arrive there, the first Palauans, got there in sailing canoes, probably from Palau or Papua New Guinea. There's a little speculation on that, but that's probably how it happened. So this kind of shows where it is. If you look a little bit down to the right of center, below it, Koror, Palau. Koror is the big island, or a small island, but it has the largest population, about 20,000 people, and or 19,000 people, and about the other 1,000 people live in other parts of the country. So it's rather congested and a busy place. If you have heard of Palau, it was probably because you're a scuba diver or know of a scuba diver, because when you go underwater, this is the kind of stuff you see. It's like the best scuba diving in the world, people say. One of the dive spots is one of the 7 natural underwater wonders of the world, the Blue Corner. And I went there quite a bit and snorkeled. I did a little diving, mostly snorkeling, and saw some incredible things like these here. Corals, schools of fish, all different types of fish. A lot of them were aggregating under the full moon. That's when the breeding periods was, which is why the full moon signifies Palau in their flag, because everything centered around the fish there. It was just unbelievable, really. What you would see is like being in a Jacques Cousteau movie. And but the star of the show there really is the sharks, because I think it was in 2008, President Toriabang enacted the first shark sanctuary in the world. And that was kind of like a awesome thing to do, because sharks are in decline, and they were in decline even back then too, because of overfishing, just merely to cut their fins off and throw them back in the water and let them die, and to bring them to rich people to have shark fin soup as sort of a status symbol. So by creating the shark sanctuary was just a worldwide statement that Palau is committed to conservation, and it has helped a lot. Here you can see the sharks in this picture. This is a bull shark. They were probably, they were some of the biggest ones, and tiger sharks. But you know what? All the time I was there, I never heard of a single instance of anybody being bothered by a shark. And on every dive trip that I went on, or snorkeling trip, people always, the first thing they talked about was the sharks when they got back on board. So it's an amazing thing. And sharks are the apex predator in this ecosystem, and they're really, really needed to keep a healthy coral reef ecosystem going. Coral reefs only comprise about 1% of the planet in the ocean, but they have 25% of the fish. Extremely productive area, and very, very important just to fisheries on a global scale. This is me. I'm kind of near a black tip shark. I saw those more than anything because they were usually in shallow water close to shore, and if I was out kayaking, I would get close to them, and it was just great to see them. This is way more dangerous statistically than getting a shark. You can maybe have a coconut hit you on the head in Palau, but other than that, it's a very safe place. It's an actual sign. I had to take a picture of it because I never saw anything like that before, but it happens. I do know somebody that had the windshield of their car busted open from one, so things happen. So I was there to do some reforestation work, and these are bauxite mines that were produced between the First World War and the Second World War during the Japanese occupation. And the soils are very, very acidic and have a high aluminum content. Bauxite is a material that's used to process into aluminum. The soils are so hard to grow anything on it This has been 80 years and nothing has really grown back. So that's why it's needed to plant trees there. Not like up here in Maine and New Hampshire where things just grow back automatically. Pitcher plants grow back there because they're insectivores and they can get some nutrients from that. And these will grow into this savanna habitat, which is what you're seeing here. But it's not really a very productive habitat for wildlife or any other uses. It's just kind of like low value land, really. They're also very susceptible to burning. And the first year that I was there was a very big year for fires, wildfires. Almost all the fires are caused by human intervention, either a farmer that was burning to make room for crops, or and the fire would let go of them, or just sometimes people would burn it just because they're arsonists and hunters. I'm sorry, it keeps flipping back and forth. Sometimes arsonists would do it just for something to do. But all of the fires are man-made, and they have a devastating effect on the ecology in many ways. This is what it looks like after a burn. This is a 180-acre burn that I saw like while it was still burning. We went and investigated it, and it was bad, really bad. As a matter of fact, this spot had we got kicked off of there because we were told that it had a lot of unexploded ordnances in there from World War II, and it was very dangerous. So we had to leave the fire, and that's another issue that happens. These are a couple of young girls that I knew very well. They worked at the Ebiil Society with me, and they are not happy with the fires, and because they understand the devastation that is happening to their country from these. This is pretty much was the extent of the firefighting equipment in the whole country. One fire truck, they weren't very effective, really. The fire truck, they'd have to be out of water really quickly, and they'd have to drive away and get some more water and come back up, and not a whole lot of hose. But what happens with these savanna habitats is they would burn until they hit a mature forest, and then they would extinguish themselves. So the problem is the savannas, if they always keep on burning, and it always depletes the soil of organic matter, and they will eventually regenerate into savannas again, but they're never going to regenerate into a full mature forest. What happens after a fire? This is just a couple of days after one of those fires. I was driving down the road and it rained. Actually, it rains a lot there. It's 150 inches a year. So you can see the brown water forming gully erosion coming down through that burned out area. And here's some same thing, gully erosion in one of the abandoned bump mines. And all of this water just kind of makes its way on down to the small streams and ends up getting into mangrove forests, which are pretty much protecting the shoreline there from typhoons, and also a very important part of the habitat for nursery grounds for fish. And they're beautiful too. And then there's adjacent to them is the seagrass beds, which is, here's a photo of that. And the seagrass beds have their own ecological system too. They have, then the next thing you want to do up to it is the reefs. And the siltation can get all the way to the reefs and kill the coral. So it's an extremely big problem ecologically there. And that was my main mission, was there to try and help with that. This is what the forest should look like. This is a lowland tropical rain forest. Palau has the largest extent of lowland tropical rain forest in Micronesia. A lot of endemic species, which are only found there, a huge diversity of species. And this is what it really ought to look like all the time. A lot of carbon capturing too. Get some really nice big trees there, with these buttresses. There's another big tree. I put that water bottle there for a couple of reasons. One is just to show the scale of it, and to demonstrate my distaste for that company that is extracting water around here. So when you have a really nice forested area, you have really nice streams like this. There's a full canopy over it, plenty of vegetation all around. So this water is doing pretty good. And here's another smaller stream. Now, this is a taro patch. Taro is a root crop that is really the staple of Palau in many countries in Micronesia. And All the trees around it are producing either nuts or berries or fruits. And it's traditionally a place where the women would go, and they always got a lot of peace and quiet and tranquility when they were in there. And they worked them really, really well. It's regenerative agriculture at its best before it became a buzzword for us in the agriculture business. This is what they do. Look at that black humus. Every year they're adding organic matter to it and alternating spots where they're actually growing taro. And there's some animals that go in there that are pretty rare, like the moorhen that isn't found any other places. Okay, this is the Ebiil Channel. This is just offshore of where I was living in the village of Ollei. And I wanted to talk about this a little bit because this has some relation to Green Mountain Conservation Group in a parallel conservation effort. There was a foreign company, I believe it was from Japan, had their sights on dredging all of this area for the sand and selling the sand. And it was going to really destroy the habitat of the grasslands and the coral reefs in the area. And this is a very productive area, one of the best reefs in the country, the northern reefs. And all of the, a lot of the local people were totally up in arms. Like usual, the corporation was going to make all the money, destroy the environment, and move on, and they knew that. So a lot of the people got organized, and kind of reminds. And then after that, the Ebiil Society was formed. But this is some of the animals. This is a sea cucumber, which is a food staple of Palau also. And actually, that was overexploited too. The Chinese would buy them all out and almost wiped them out. So now there's a lot of efforts to reintroduce them in the country. And this is a dugong, a really cool sea mammal. Looks a lot like a manatee. If you've ever been to Florida or the Caribbean, very similar. And they rely 100% on these grass beds. They just move around in these grass beds and they graze it. So if they dredged all of that area, both of these animals would have probably been wiped out, at least in that area. So enter Ann Singio, who lives in Palau. And so she is one of the people that organized to put a stop to the sand mining that was going to go on. And she helped form the Ebiil Society and is the executive director since then. It's been about 20 years. And she continues as the executive director. And she's really just a very powerful woman and really knows how to get things done. She got the President's Award in 2020 for environmentalism. She's very well respected, and I was very, very happy to be associated with her, and I learned a lot from her. This is the training center that they built, and that's where I lived. And this is the village of Ollei. This is what it's all about. It's a fishing village here. That structure that you can see in the foreground, that's where they processed all the fish. And, the boats are this is low tide right now, so they're not going anywhere. But once they can get their boats out, people are always out fishing. That's their livelihood. And that's very common for the entire country. They also had a nice sailing canoe at the Ebiil Society. And they have a kids camp there. And they teach the kids how to sail these traditional canoes. Part of the mission of the Ebiil Society is to pass on traditional knowledge to the younger people in the country. And this is one way that they were doing it, along with lots of environmental education, especially of trying to match traditional ecological knowledge with modern day science to accomplish their goals in conservation. So I was on this boat a lot. It was awesome. in this, I think this day we went out there and we were collecting little seedlings, we call them wildings, in the forest and bring them back to propagate. And this is part of the crew, most of the crew of the Ebiil Society, and it was just a lot of fun. Get up in the morning, get out in the boat, go out in the forest on an island somewhere, collect some seedlings, come on back. And sometimes the water was shallow where we were trying to go, so a couple of people would always jump overboard. We'd have to raise the outboard motors and just kind of like walk the boat in to shore a lot closer. And this is Mareng. She was showing me their method of reproducing las trees, which is a very valuable tree for a lot of wood products. And it's one of the 7 species that they decided could grow in these abandoned mines in these very poor soils. So we're doing some cuttings there. And we also collected seeds. This is on das tree, the nuts from it, which grow right along the coast. And you can see in the upper part is the seed husk. And then the white thing in the middle on that rack is the embryo. And I found there was a couple of ways of doing it. I found the Stone Age method worked the best for cracking the shells and getting to the embryo. And then we would all kind of sit around or stand around the wheelbarrow with a mixture of a few different types of soil. Part of it was the red volcanic, very clayey soil. We would also go to actually kind of a road catch basement nearby, and there was some really nice dark soil in there. We'd shovel that out. And then we would also have a compost operation going there and mix all 3 together and put them in these little reusable plastic pots. And then they would go into the greenhouse. These are a couple of the boys that live next door because there were some COVID restrictions, even though at that time they had not experienced COVID, but there was like bring your child to school day every day there. So these guys, their mother is Meringue, and she brought them over a lot, so they helped out a bit. This is the greenhouse, or not really a greenhouse, but the nursery that we use where we put the seedlings to propagate. And those white things are, curved things are whale bones that they had found and from a dead whale that washed up the shore. So they use it to help support the structure and to add a little decoration. And this is Marge. She understands work-life balance pretty well. She was very hard worker, but every once in a while she would just do this, lay down for like 5 minutes. She knew how to power nap. After about 5 minutes, she'd get right back up and go back to work. And it was amazing. I thought she'd stay there for a lot longer, but maybe it wasn't very comfortable just laying on that wood. So one day I went to a meeting. We had a number of meetings, and we had some people from the Forest Service there and talking about a lot of different things. And one of the things that really caught my mind heavily was one of the experts was mentioned that the forest soils of a mature forest are 17% organic matter. And that's why they were so lush. And they were able, with that organic matter, buffer the aluminum toxicity. So many other plants could grow there. And it just kind of light bulb went off in my head. People were talking about all these things. I just kind of stood up and I said, you guys, I think the solution is we just have to mulch a lot more on these trees that we're planting. Because I had been to a planting where they were just not mulching at all, take a couple of leaves, and I knew that wasn't enough. And this really kind of made me understand that. So it became my mission while I was there to get more mulch and add mulching into the program for their tree planting operation. And I took it very seriously. And so I went to the nearest gas station, about a half a mile up the road from the Ebiil Society. This is it. And the attendant filled up the truck with gas. And I made the long journey down off of Babbledab Island, down south to Koror, to the recycling center. And I met this man. Didn't catch his name, didn't recognize his face. He always wore that pink t-shirt over his face with the sunglasses. I didn't really have the nerve to ask him why. And I met him a year later when I went back again. And, he's saying, oh, yeah, I know you and all that stuff. And I said, you do? I go, I don't recognize you at all. And then finally, I realized he was this guy with a t-shirt over his face. So he was a great guy. And it took me a while to work out a deal to get all this mulch. I had to go through the recycling center's manager, who was a Japanese man that didn't speak very good English. And then I had to get approval from the governor of the state. There's 16 states in Palau. Everyone has a governor, and they all have their own congresses, plus the National Congress and the presidents and all that. So it's a very politically heavy country. So after a month, I got approval and went, and he was the manager of where the mulch was, and we worked out a deal. And over here is on the right is my friend Omar. I heard he was going to be on today. I hope he made it. And he was the manager for Nardak Lake Conservation Area in the state of Melio, and just a really good guy. I was desperate because I needed a truck I had one truck, but I needed another one. And he immediately said, yeah, I got a truck for you. I got a dump truck and we'll help you get the mulch. So we went back there and we had the civil action team, which is kind of a unique service from armed services group that go to Palau. They rotate like every 6 months to each branch of the service. I think this was the Air Force. And they had the skid steer. So they said, yeah, we'll volunteer and we'll go down there, but we can only have it for 2 days to load the mulch with. So me and Omar just went there and loaded up the trucks and we had to go about 30 miles to where the planting site was and went and just brought as much mulch as we could in those 2 days. And Omar had a dump truck. I didn't. I had to shovel it out every time I got there, which was good because I got a good workout. We also decided when I was there, after I kind of was pretty adamant about mulching, and Singyo decided to get a chipper. So we bought this chipper, and this is our first day using it. It was really funny. The girls there were pretty amazed at how it worked, and it was shooting brush all over the place. But it ended up not working very well because that's a beetle nut frond that's in Meringue's hand there, and it ended up clogging up a lot. And it took me like 4 hours to unclog it. And then we decided, well, this probably isn't worth it. So we'll just concentrate on getting mulch from the Karora landfill instead. So that's what we did. And we kept on getting mulch from there. But I also had been told that and saw that in landscaping around people's homes, they used coconuts to mulch. So we had a coconut grove across the way from the Ebiil Society. And these are the two boys from the neighborhood. So I employed them to help me, and they were having a blast. You know, one of the kids was in the back of the truck and the other throwing coconuts to him from the ground. And so we just loaded up the truck with coconuts and drove it up to the planting site and unloaded them. And Jason, the guy in the back, had an idea. You know, he said, yeah, these got to all be segmented out, you know, husked. And he goes, it's going to be a lot of work to do it the traditional ways. He goes, why don't we just make a big pile on the ground and run the pickup truck over it a bunch of times? Brilliant idea. So that's what we did. Thank you to Jason for saving tons and tons of work for that idea. And it was kind of fun too. So this is what it ends up looking like. There's our piles of wood mulch and piles of coconuts. And we're kind of ready for planting. I wanted to have all this stuff on hand before the big planting day. These two women, that's Ann Singyo on the right and Jen Narawa on the left, who is the manager of another conservation area called Oscar. And she is where the site was. So the two of them they collaborate a lot on projects together. They work really well together, and both of them really know how to make things happen. So we wanted to have a big planting day with a lot of volunteers. So we had a community meeting at the state office in Narkmau. And Palau is pretty much a matriarchal society. The women are in charge, and all the men know it, but they joke about it, and they have a hard time admitting it, but it is a fact. And those three women over there on the left they're not going to plant a single tree. They knew it. Everybody knew it, but they were specifically invited to come to the meeting because the organizers Jennifer knew that they had a lot of pull in town. And if they asked people to come and plant trees for volunteers, people were going to come and plant trees. So they did. And this was our first big planting right here. Pretty good group. And there's something notable here. Those blue bags was something that Tracy and I came up with the idea for and bought for them because they originally were just carrying the seedlings around in plastic bags. And anybody who knows me well knows my feelings about plastic, and I just can't tolerate it. And so we had to change that program too. So we got these really nice cloth bags for them just from a supermarket, and that's what they're using now. So they're reusable, so no single-use plastic waste. And they've been carrying on that tradition. So that's really makes me happy. And when I went back there again, I saw they were still doing that. Had a pretty good group there. Tracy is the white woman there in the front. She was with me there. She's easy to notice. And I'm the guy in the back, the white guy in the back. So before a big planting like this, I usually give like an instructional speech and explain why we're planting. I wanted to especially let everybody know all of the steps that are involved to get to just this point of planting the trees, and how very, very important it was to plant the trees properly and put them in there at the right height, mulch them properly, because it'd be a whole lot of wasted work otherwise. So as you can see by the stains on my shirt, I was hot out and that's all sweat, and I hadn't even done anything yet that day. So had them all gathering around there, and that's I'm giving my little planting demonstration here. Got my limber boots on. For those of you from New Hampshire and Maine, you understand the significance of that. And I'm glad I did, although I was really in a minority. I'm kind of a tenderfoot anyway, but all the natives were, they were wearing flip-flops, and they were getting around faster than I was. But I was glad I had them because it was rugged terrain. So that's just another view. The man in the middle there is the ambassador from the United States, and the woman on the right is with a straw hat was the ambassador from Australia, and the woman in the blue shirt was an employee named Sarek from the Ebiil Society. So we had quite a few diverse groups of people. We had people from the Japanese embassy also come and help out. I just kind of noticed that when you ask people that volunteer, it was kind of a cool project. So it wasn't that hard. You didn't have to really twist any arms. People were more than willing to come and help out. This is, since the mulching of the betel nut and coconut fronds wasn't working good, we wanted to use them anyway. We had quite a few of them. And so we would had the idea of just dragging them down and laying them down in between all the seedlings that we planted to form a bit of a microclimate in the ground between all the seedlings. And that helped quite a bit too. So this is us just passing them on down the hill to other people, and then people were grabbing them and mulching with them. There's no ATVs or tractors or anything like that. So all the mulch and all the coconuts had to be transported in these grain bags by hand across the mines. And they're pretty heavy. It was a great workout though too. So it was just a matter of course, that's how things are done. This is a man that is, he just showed up on his own. Well, he was invited there, but he started husking these coconuts on his own. That is a pointed stick. Of course, he had a machete because everybody has a machete, and he just sharpened both ends of it and jammed one into the ground, and then would take the coconut and apply pressure on the sharpened stick point and separate the husk from the rest of the coconut shell and make them into little segments. And so they were available for using to mulch around the trees. They actually have little contests for this activity at the night market, which is kind of a big event they have every couple of weeks, and they have contests to see who could do it the fastest. So it's a traditional method of conservation. A lot of activity on planting days, a lot of people. If you see the man with a yellow towel or t-shirt on his head, he has a power auger, and that was new. Also, new development. A lot of times, always people were using natixes to dig in the very hard, kind of rocky ground, and it was wearing people out a lot. And we really wanted people to enjoy themselves, and it was so high you could only work about 3 or 4 hours anyway. So we had this we bought 2 power augers, and that was a game changer really, because we were able to go there the day before and the day of and just start drilling holes at the proper spacing. And then when we had all the volunteers there, all they had to do was plant and mulch, and it just saved a lot of work for people. Kept them coming back. People of all ages, the youth of Palau are very, very interested in conservation work. And prime example, just saw a young woman here. And we figured might as well make mulching an art form. So this is what we strove for. These trees are properly mulched. We have the betel nut fronds in between it. We have the wood mulch right up against the seedling and the coconut segments surrounding it. So helps a lot. And they grew. I don't have any great pictures now, but I know that some of them have grown to about 8 feet tall already in just 2 years. This is what it looks like after everything is done. We kept some spaces. You'll see some blank spaces in there. We did it in kind of a checkerboard fashion to save time and labor and trees. and under the assumption that all of these are going to grow into each other. Those blank spaces will get filled in eventually through natural regeneration over time. And this is a little bit afterwards. This tree in the foreground is a coconut tree. It was not on the list of the 7 trees that are known to be able to grow in these soils. But when we brought all those coconuts up for mulching, there was 22 of them that were starting to sprout, and I didn't want to waste them. And I thought, well, let's just try an experiment. And so we planted them too, and they're growing. And so I'm really glad. So now we got 8 species of trees that are going to work there. And this is coconut trees are probably the most useful tree in the world for everything that they can do. So it's really good to have those growing there also. Hot weather and water go along very well. Just as a matter of course, people are using these igloo containers with ice. They did not get addicted to bottled water, which is really good, saves on the plastic waste. And a couple of them had Kool-Aid in it. And if you look close, there's 3 of those women that were in the original meeting sitting there. And this structure is called a summer house. It provides shade and get away from the rain. And so they just kind of sat there all day and entertained people and talked. And they did their job, though. They got all the volunteers to show up. We also, on a big volunteer day, we were blasting some great Palauan music, very loud, so the planters could hear it. And these guys are barbecuing quite a lot of fish, and people brought potluck food with them, you know, taro and rice and some desserts. And so around 1 o'clock, we would finish up the planting and go drink some water, and then just start eating this awesome barbecued fish and some other things. And here's my buddy Omar. He's got what some people told me was the best fish to have. That's a unicorn fish. And you can tell by the smile, you're very, very happy. He'd already had his, but he was going to take that home because it was extra. So I did go fishing a couple times there. And this is Jason again. And that's a great big needlefish that he caught. And I didn't catch much that day, but he was really lucky. He caught that one. And then I went again with Omar and caught a few skipjack tunas on this trip. But actually, and I didn't bring any pictures of it, but we saw whales. And we also saw, which was probably the best part of the day, was a whole flock of around 7 or 8 magnificent frigate birds, which is really kind of a rare bird sighting. And they're the ones that showed us where the tuna were, because they were feeding on anchovies that were near the surface. And it was so great to just see them feeding. There's such a rare bird. And it was great to see them. I enjoyed that more than I did catching the fish. Okay, so this is Ansingio. Again, she's walking the walk. She doesn't just run the operation. She gets out there and sweats with all of us. And I'm showing this picture because this is one of the burned down savannas that we were planting. We did not just plant in the mined areas. The savannas, if they were burnt, they needed planting too, because they were going to be very prone to erosion. We found out through some research of the U.S. Forest Service that if you planted buffers within these large areas, like say crosswise, once the trees grow up to at least 5 or 6 years old, then they will actually stop the fire from spreading through the savanna. So we were planting buffer strips in these savannas. And here's another spot we went, very steep. Honestly, just going up and down that hill a couple times was enough to wear you out, because it was really hot when we were there. And everybody was game though. Everybody planted trees, grabbing some shade when you can. And the power auger you can see on the right, another very important part of the tree planting community. I know it made Elam very happy. She didn't have to use this tool anymore. Just taking a break. We have people from all ages, as you can see. Little kids, it's great. This was not a burnt savanna, but we were planting a fire break also in anticipation that maybe it might burn someday. So we were out there planting like a line of these trees to form as a buffer in case someone did start a fire. Then it might only burn a smaller area rather than a big area. On those hot days, this is the best thing to do. Go to this waterfall, which is the biggest waterfall in Micronesia. And actually this was Tracy's mission there, was to help with trail work to get down to this waterfall. And we had a really good day too. Around this, the governor of the state of Narkmau asked her to flag out and construct a new trail in addition to some other work she was doing. And so we went there with a couple of the rangers with machetes and just kind of flagged the trail all the way on down. And then, or actually we flagged the trail coming up, and then we got to the top and we still had a lot of time left and nobody was too tired, especially the rangers. They were in really good shape. And so we said, well, why don't we just go back down and cut this trail? So we just went down there with the machetes and cut the trail. And it has not really been advertised. I did use it again at my second trip down there, and I was able to find my way pretty well. And so that was a good, quick accomplishment. You know, put it in about, I don't know, it was about a mile of trail, I guess, in a day. So in the early mornings when I was living up in Ollei, I would get up and go to the beach, and I would just walk the beach. And I knew there was a beach there, and I thought it was public, but it was actually private. But there wasn't a lot of people around, so it was a beautiful long beach. You can see how far it goes down, and it was really good exercise. And I would just walk down and back up it. But I noticed there was a lot of plastic trash. They call it marine debris. I never heard that term before, but it was washed up plastic trash on this beach. Just beautiful, pristine beach. So I had a hard time with that. So I would go there. The next day, I brought a plastic bag with me, or not a plastic bag, a cloth bag, and filled it with plastic. And I did this for about 2 weeks every morning, and filled up a bag and helped clean up the beach. And I heard that they had a massive cleanup there a few months ago too, which was really nice. So I was kind of doing my part. I mean, I figured that was my entry fee to this private beach. I didn't run into many people anyway. A couple of dogs. They didn't like me though. So after about 2 weeks, it was sea turtle nesting season. So I had to get up earlier, and because the Ebiil Society has rights to this island, they have management rights to it. I actually helped write the memorandum of agreement with them from the state land use authority. And there are turtles that nest on that island, green turtles and hawksbill, both endangered species. So earlier in the morning, we would get up, hop on the boat, and head out to the island, and we would look for the nests. And you had to have a good eye. I had to learn how to recognize what a nest was and find them, and we can see, monitor them. And I didn't see any hatching while I was there. We did encounter some poachers, which we sort of confronted. They lied to us. And then when we turned our back and walked along the island, they packed up all their stuff. They said they were camping there for a couple days, but once we were out of sight, they packed up all their stuff, jumped in the boat, and took off. And so we knew that they had poached because we saw the poached site. They took the eggs and they were going to eat them or sell them. And so we called the rangers, and they were getting ready to apprehend them at the dock. But then we could see them with our binoculars, and we saw them halfway to the dock, and they had stopped the boat and they were just throwing all the eggs overboard. So when they got to the dock, there was no evidence. So they kind of got away with it. But I think they got the point that people were watching, and word gets around fast. So the next year there was some good hatchings. This just shows signage that we knew there was nesting there, and we didn't want people to clear any trees around it or disturb it in any way. Okay, this tree, very, very special tree. This is on our island also. It was eroding away. A typhoon had come through, and it's really about 2 feet of its roots are being exposed. And this tree doesn't even have a scientific name. This is the name of it. I can't pronounce it very well. I don't do a good job. If Omar can tell us later, if he's on, he could do it. But when the scientists kind of discovered it, they wanted to give it a scientific name, and all the local people said, no way, this is a sacred tree. We're not going to disgrace it by giving it any other name than what this is. So that's its name. And so I had told Ann that I had been an arborist in my future career, and she was very excited about that and said, you got to help us with this tree because we're going to lose it. And I said, yes, I have done work like that before in a lake and saved this big pine that was going to go in the fall in the water. And she goes, great, let's go out there and make it happen. So I went out there, took a bunch of measurements and came up with a design, basically to you build a seawall around it with easily found rocks around there and even corals, dead corals. And submitted it to EQPB, which is similar to what we would call EPA here in this country. And they said, okay. And then by the time I got back again, they had the job implemented and it was looking pretty good. The seawall the water would still wash over it, but it would deposit sands and it raised the level of the ground all around the tree. So I was really happy about that. Sometimes when we left the island, the tide would change and we'd have to walk long ways through the shallow water to get to our boat. And this is just kind of a normal way of doing things. Didn't matter, the water temperature was like 85 degrees, so just walk right in there. And that's a paddleboard on the right that we would like shuffle gear off with. This is the visitor center on the island. One of the things that the Ebiil Society is working on is having allowing people to camp there, but very sustainably, and do a lot of environmental education. There's some unbelievable archaeology there too, which that'd be a whole nother program to go through. And there's some endangered species and some invasive species, which we are working to control. And there's another whale bones. They're decorating it. They want to make use of it. You know, they had a bench there that was uneven. So, hey, why not just take a vertebrae from a whale bone and use it to prop it up? So there it is. That's another traditional ecological conservation practice. There were monitor lizards. There was a lot of talk from people thinking that these were brought over by humans. And I thought they were too. And then while I was there, some new research based on DNA found out that they'd been in Palau for about 1,500 years and were there before any of other people really got there besides Palauans, which got there about 4,500 years ago. And so people are just assuming that they might have hopped a ride on a floating piece of tree that was being washed up and spent a lot of time in the ocean and got to these islands and started populating. Very large creatures, and I was happy to have them on Palau Island because there were invasive rats there, black Micronesian rats, which can devastate the ecology of these islands, and they do. They could eat a lot of birds' eggs, and they eat a lot of vegetation, and if they're left uncontrolled, it'll be the end of the island, the entire ecology. So while I was there, we started a poisoning program, which was effective, but it wasn't enough to eradicate them. And we would go out there at night in the evening. I was out there for 3 nights and set out these baits, poison baits for the rats, and then go out there and grab them in the morning and pick up anything that wasn't eaten. We had to do it. The rats had to have 3 meals of it. And so we were there for 3 days doing that. But now I understand that they're going to, a massive rat eradication program is going to be happening on that island now. I'm really happy about that too. One of the reason that we had to pick up the bait all the time is because the Pakai is a bird. It's also called the Micronesian megapode, and it's a rather large bird. It's about the size of a chicken, and this is its nest. Both the male and the female tend to this nest here, and it's about 4 feet tall and about 12 feet wide, and they add compost to the sand, leafy material, to increase the temperature. They lay 1 egg, and they tend to it by adjusting the temperature that's being produced by the compost in that nest, and throughout the entire incubation period of the bird. And then eventually it hatches, and this is a little baby one that I saw. They come out fully grown almost. They don't need any tending by their parents once they're out of the shell. I've read that they're the most precocious bird in the world, and they're ready to eat and run and everything as soon as they hatch. So they're rare, and so there's a lot of attention paid to keeping that population intact on that island and any other island there. Another endangered species. Another picture of a little one. Called megapodes because they have great big feet that they use. They just scratch around all the time in the dirt and finding things to eat. So I turned my attention also to Lake Nardau, Nardoc Nature Preserve. And this has a bunch of endangered species, a bunch of orchids, really incredible place. And it has Lake Nardoc is the largest lake in Micronesia. Over here, we'd call it a pond. It's about 28 acres in size. But Nardoc means living spring in Palau, so it's a spring-fed water body. But there are also some tributaries coming into it. And you can see there's an island in the middle there, and it formed all the way across the lake. And that was getting people concerned that this plant, which is actually kind of a rare plant, it only grows, it's like grows on a floating mat, and they grow up to about 7 or 8 feet tall. Like they look like about the size of a corn stalk. But people were concerned about it clogging up the lake too much. So they organized a group of people and had another field days. Once a month, people would go up there and cut and remove that plant just to kind of knock it back some. Nardoc Lake is probably the most important breeding grounds for saltwater crocodiles in Micronesia. And that interested me a lot. And I did some research. I found out there hadn't been a census of the crocodiles in quite a while. So I wanted to do it. So I just kind of gathered up a bunch of people. Once again, it wasn't very hard. Said, hey, you guys want to do this cool thing and go count crocodiles up at Lake Nardoc? And so it's like, yeah, sure. So we all went up there and with our binoculars, and we're scanning the shoreline, and we didn't see anything. You can see that sign says duck lookout, because it's also a migratory on the migratory path of ducks, which are pretty rare around there. It's also a Ramsar site. If anybody knows what Ramsar sites, it's a globally significant wetland. So when it was getting dark, we thought, well, maybe we'll have a better opportunity to see some of these crocodiles with our flashlights. So in the darkness, we shined all of our flashlights on the shores, and we counted 29 sets of eyes along the shoreline there. And that didn't include what might have been on the shoreline where we were standing. So kind of extrapolating, and we figured there's probably about 40 crocodiles in there at that time and breeding. And then they would go down the stream, the outlet, and to the salt water afterwards. This man next to me is Chief Ollei. He's the paramount chief of Palau. And the chiefs have always been there, and he's a great guy. I got along with him wonderful. He's a really funny guy. And I was up there on the day of the volunteer day, and they have, although they don't, Palau has a government that's very similar to the United States, is modeled after the United States, but the chiefs still have an awful lot of say. Kind of informally, they act as advisors to the president and Congress, and they're pretty much the liaison to the people in their community. So he was one of the people that wanted to clear these plants out of the lake, and was able to round up a lot of volunteers. These men are held in high status, and it was an honor really to meet them and joke around with them for quite a bit. So this is what it looked like. Lots of people showed up, I think about 80, and there's some people out in the lake cutting and loading up the boats, and then a whole line of people from standing on that platform, that bamboo raft, because it was so muddy you would fall right down there. I did one night. I went there one night again to count crocodiles, and stepped off of that thing with one leg and went all the way up to my hip. And anyway, this is very, very vicious mud. So anyway, we would pass these all the way up to high ground where they wouldn't cause any problems and repopulate. And this is what it was like in the middle. Oh yeah, and I just noticed that. See those little gray boxes? Those are the waterproof boxes, pelican boxes. Just about everybody had one, because that's where they put their beetle nuts, because everybody chews beetle nut. And so they would just have beetle nut in there and pass it all around, and everything was a custom. Not very good for them, but everybody does it. And it's actually the #1 cash crop in Palau. So I had to get wet. I couldn't let those guys have all the fun. So I had to go jump in there. And I figured there had been other people in there. There's no crocodiles anymore. So got in up to my chest and helped at this end of it too. So that was most of the fun stuff I did, but I want to talk a little bit about Palau and their conservation ethics. When you get to Palau and you go through immigration, they're going to stamp your passport with this, and I'm going to read it out loud. This was produced by the children of Palau for the children of Palau. So this is what this says. It says, "Children of Palau, I take this pledge as your guest to preserve and protect your beautiful and unique island home. I vow to tread lightly, act kindly, and explore mindfully. I shall not take what is not given. I shall not harm what does not harm me. The only footprints I shall leave are those that will wash away. And if you want to get in the country, you have to take that pledge and you have to sign it. And you have to give them $100 too, because that $100 goes to conservation work, earmarked. So it's by the children for the children. And these are children of Palau. They want to have a nice place too when they grow up. And all of the adults want them to have a nice place when they grow up. Everybody is conservation minded in this country, and they bring it on down to the kids. This guy right here and his buddies, we're all out planting trees. And this girl, that's such a great symbol. A peace sign, planting trees. What could be better than that? So that concludes my talk. I will entertain any questions if you like.
All right, thank you, Nels. That was wonderful to get a glimpse into your adventures in Palau, and you have a great way of telling your story and sharing your appreciation of nature throughout. And of course, a lot of the work that you did there parallels the work that you do here. And wow, I want to go visit and take their pledge.
Yeah,
pretty cool.
They have been a global example.
Yeah,
other countries are following a little bit.
They're feeling a lot of the same things we have to deal with here with environmental issues, but it's obvious that they feel them more acutely and they're more aware of their impact. So really cool story. I will get to some of these questions. We have a few in the chat, and so I'll just read them out loud and you can tackle them one at a time here. So Tracy shares that there were Facebook posts recently of trees that you planted in 2020 that are already bearing fruit. So she shares that fact.
Yeah. That's
and
amazing.
Barbara Bald says, how far apart do you have to plant the trees? How fast do they grow? And how often do fires burn the trees you plant?
We did 6-foot spacing on them, and they grow, they start bearing fruit in 2 years, obviously. And they were up to about 8 feet tall, some of them. Cool was the name of that tree that was doing the best. When I had monitored it, I saw that those particular trees are doing the best.
Can you say that name again?
UKUL. Cool.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. The next question is from Barbara as well. What language do they speak in Palau?
They have their own language. It's Palauan, and they also a lot of them speak English, and sometimes they throw a little English in with the Palauan. They prefer Palauan. I noticed that a lot of times I had no idea what was going on. Everybody at the Ebiil Society was speaking Palauan, and then like the next day I'm finding out that I'm supposed to be like jumping on a boat or something like that. And they say, well, we talked about this yesterday. It's like, yeah, I didn't understand the word you said. So, but sometimes they'll throw in just enough English where you can kind of keep track. I was at another meeting one time. It was actually, we were writing up the memorandum of agreement to give the Ebiil Society the rights to that island. And I pretty much, I wrote parts of it, and I knew there was going to be some issues with the chiefs.
You just froze, Nels.
And I was going to amend the document, and one of the guys says, "Okay, Nels, we'll tell you what we want." And so I kind of reiterated exactly what I thought they were going to say, and he goes, "Wow, you really learned Palau fast. How long you been here? Just 2 weeks?" Yeah, I was able to grasp it, so. But yeah, it was very nice that they speak English too.
So Tracy, do you want to share what you've written here in the chat feature about how they're managing visitors sustainably and establishing?
Sure. Tourism was, prior to COVID, was a huge part of the Palauan economy, depending on how you measure it, between 20 and 40% of their economy. And also there's fishing and agriculture. So the environment is a huge part of, it's tied to the economy. You can't have a good economy without a good environment there, in particular. So kind of as I was heading out in May of 2020 from my fellowship there, I was able to get together with a group of people that they kind of call themselves the board, but it was the Palau Visitor Authority and some other sort of tourism related businesses, people with the Pew Charitable Trust. And we started a process for how can we bring some of the visitor management expertise that I used to work for the National Park Service. How can we bring some of that expertise to Palau during the pause of COVID? Because they had a number of, particularly scuba diving and snorkeling sites where the coral reefs have really been decimated by large numbers of Chinese visitors. And so they wanted to manage that more sustainably. And so there's actually an MOU between the National Park Service and the Ministry of Finance in Palau now. The official version will be signed in a couple of weeks at our Oceans Conference. The Deputy Secretary of Interior is coming to sign that, so there'll be a formal ceremony. But we've already started. The first workshop actually is happening this week, and it's the focus is at Nardak Lake, which was the site that Nels just showed you. And the second site will be Jellyfish Lake. So the Park Service is going to do the training. The Palauans are there to kind of help implement the visitor use management. And then for the second site, the Palauans will be the lead and the National Park Service will be there for support. And my understanding is I think they have funding for an additional 2 more sites after that. So there will be sites in at least 4 of the 16 states that use this methodology that sets sort of triggers and standards for, when you're starting to see impacts, how you manage the visitors that are very, very site specific and tied to the resources that you're trying to protect. So I think this is a great legacy for both Nels and I.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes, both of you, it sounds like you left your mark there for the better. And
Tricia's doing all this volunteer too afterwards. I got to really kind of hand it to her for making this part of it happen.
That is a plows in my heart now.
Yeah.
So
I'm really glad Nardak Lake became the one too. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. No, it's great to have you both on here.
Yeah.
Share. So Rick Vanderpool asked, how threatened by climate change are the coral reefs, i.e. from typhoon frequency increases?
Yeah, they are for sure. Typhoons cause coral bleaching, destroy a lot of coral, and acidification and warming waters. There's a really great organization there called Palau Institute of Coral Reef, I think. We just always call it PICRIC. But they are, there's a lot of very smart people there that are trying to propagate new strains of coral that could live in warmer waters and doing the best they can. And there's also worries about actually the hospital being washed away because it's near sea level. I was in the hospital for a while, so it's near and dear to my heart, but they may have to move the hospital or at least shore up all of the pier around it where it's on. So it's a big, big concern. The president of Palau, Sarango Whips, spoke at the United Nations and just pleading with the industrialized countries to do what they can to stop it, because it's harming these very small countries that don't really contribute much to the CO2 problems, but they're the ones that are going to suffer the most. So he was
and most of the people live, I would say, within 15 meters of sea level. There are higher areas on Babbeldaub, but they're very steep, and so most of the people live close to the shoreline. So as sea level rises, they will be vulnerable, or they'll have to relocate to areas that they haven't traditionally lived in.
So there's another follow-up question to the climate change and impacts. Barbara Bald asked, what effect might it have on the sharks?
on the charts.
Sharks.
Oh, sharks.
Sharks.
Well, I don't know. It's a good question. Probably not going to be good for them because they depend upon the coral reefs, for their livelihood. I mean, probably everybody on here knows ecology, and once you get a couple of things out of whack, it really affects everything else. But that's the least of the worries for the sharks. Exploitation by overfishing is by far the #1 problem that's happening with them. And then if you
don't have those apex predators, they know now that without sharks, you can't have a healthy coral reef ecosystem, because they keep all the fish that are eating the coral moving around. So you kind of need those apex predators, just like you need wolves to keep the deer and the elk in check. So it's very similar process.
And one thing I didn't mention is Palau is, since the shark sanctuary has put a commercial fishing moratorium of 80% of their water the ocean surrounding their country, Palau National Marine Sanctuary. And so they're trying to keep commercial fishing out of there. They're somewhat successful. Enforcement is an issue because it's such a vast area and the resources are slow, but they make a statement with that too. If they do catch a boat, they burn it and they film it and they spread it out to the world and says, come to Palau and commercial fish, and this is what's going to happen to your boat. So I saw some photos. I know a guy that saw it happen where they burnt 3 Chinese fishing boats once. So people got to know, don't come and exploit our resources that they need for their livelihood. And the Palauans there's not really hardly any commercial fishing in Palau. It's really for their own sustenance. So when you exploit their resources, you're taking away their ability to live, the way they always have, and making them totally reliant upon imported food, which is an issue, huge issue.
So Teresa asked, when are you going back, Nels?
That's my sister. Hi, Terry. I don't know. I don't think the government's going to send me again. I got to figure it out. So I definitely would like to. And Ann told me that I'm part of the Ebiil family, so I could always have a place to stay and something to do, there. And she says if I want to write a grant, I could maybe get myself there and work there too, But I would definitely like to go. There's more to see. There's a couple of islands that I hadn't made it to yet, up on the very north and the very south, and it's just a wonderful place, So
definitely.
Did you do any?
I was very fortunate that my dad and sister got to come at the very beginning, right before everything locked down for COVID. So we had an awesome week. My dad's 80, or was at 80 at the time, but he pretty much did everything.
Oh yeah, man, I was worn out just hanging around with you guys. Never mind an 80-year-old guy.
So Norman wants to know, did you do any canoeing while you were there? It looked like you did a lot of motorboats and.
Yes, I was able to go into a traditional outrigger racing canoe. Actually, Tracy did too, and her 80-year-old father, and they have a canoe team there. And so they allowed us to go there. My second time around, I made attempts to get on a team, but it never really happened. It just didn't, I don't know, it was kind of interfering with some stuff I was doing. I did a lot of swimming when I was there the second time. But Norman's asking that because he and I were canoe guides together. So, because I would try that.
We kayaked quite a bit too to go snorkeling.
Yeah, some kayaking. Yeah. And if I do go back there, I gotta have a kayak. Just look at this picture. I mean, makes you just want to jump on a boat. Go.
Mm-hmm. Nels, I was wondering, I know a lot of small countries, island countries, are taking first world plastics and trash and making money just disposing of it, since we have this huge, waste stream issue. I'm wondering if that's happening in Micronesia or in Palau that you know of, where they just take it in illegally and then burn it, sort of thing.
Not that I know of, at least, what I had learned about Micronesia, but I don't think so. I mean, I don't think that would be anything.
They know better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
The big recycling center in Karor, they have a glass blowing place where they were melting down broken glass and making art with it. I mean, they really try to do things right.
It sounds like we can learn a lot from their culture there, and they have integrated conservation into many aspects of it. And it sounds like you and Tracy did wonderful things to help promote conservation there and made great leaps and bounds for their communities, sharing your knowledge. And thank you so much for sharing tonight. I think that we all learned a little something and all lived vicariously through you both for a short period of time. We got to see a different part of the world that maybe some of us will never set foot on, but appreciate that you're doing the good work and doing good things over there. So there are no other questions in the chat feature, but if anyone else wanted to unmute and just ask a question, if you didn't know how to use the chat feature tonight, feel free to do that as well. We have a lot of folks saying thank you, and thank you for speaking tonight, Nels, and sharing.
Yeah, I just want to have a comment. Since I flew in there twice in 1972, that's 50 years ago, and it brings back great memories. At that time, there was only one hotel at Battlethorpe, and we landed there. We didn't go more than 12 miles away. Spent a lot of time snorkeling. It was beautiful, but the U.S. government didn't allow very many people to go in there at all.
Well, before we leave tonight, I just want to mention that if folks are interested in seeing what else is coming up for GMCG events, we have our Polar Dip next Friday, and you can be a Polar Dip ambassador. This is our fundraising program. In the springtime, we jump into the Ossipee River, which is right outside our conservation center here, and we raise money for all the research and education, advocacy, and land conservation work that we do. We also have an opportunity for people who want to volunteer and help us monitor local rivers and streams for their water quality. We have an Earth Day art exhibit coming up at the Conway Library. And we have a source water protection program coming up with New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services in early June. And a forestry hike on Green Mountain with the Forest Society in late June. So if any of those things, the training for rivers and water testing, Earth Day art exhibit, all these programs are at www.gmcg.org if you're interested in checking those out. And once again, thank you so much to Nels and Tracy as well for sharing your experience with us tonight. I think it was really nice to get away for a moment. Our world is going through a lot right now, and to hear all the good work that you're doing and all the good things that the communities over there are doing with their children and making the world a better place for them is inspiring and heartwarming. So thank you.
Okay, thank you all for listening.
All right. Have a wonderful night. Nice to see all your faces.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
everybody.
Okay,
Nice to see you.
all right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Steve.